When we were writing, I said you can play the character you want to play, but I get to add one thing to your story and you do not get to say no. That I remember.
Welcome to the Character Sheet, comicbook.com's official fantasy and tabletop YouTube channel. I am Christian Hoffer. Today I am joined by producer Pete and two very special guests. If you have watched D&D Adventures, the new D&D TV channel, you probably recognize them. I am talking to Brian David Judkins and Ned Donovan of Encounter Party. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Hi.
Very good.
So, you have a TV show now. How's that feel?
It's pretty awesome. I can't say really anything more than it feels surreal and crazy and awesome. I mean, Brian and I came up with the idea for what people are now watching in December of 2018. So we're like half a month shy of 5 years ago when this idea began, making its way through our consciousness, and we started making the podcast as a proof of concept to make this show someday. So to see, I joke, but when we cast the original podcast, we told our cast, like, our goal is to take this idea, build a proof of concept, get some backing behind it, and then make a TV show. And it feels really good when we got on set to be able to say, like, and nailed it.
Did you guys, you're both card-carrying actors, you're working actors. Did you ever expect that, one of your projects was going to be a D&D TV show? And not like a D&D TV show where you're like running around wielding swords and stuff like that, but a show in which you play D&D.
I mean, like when?
Well, I must say, I guess it's been 5 years since you
came out. Since the idea, yes.
It's been, since the idea. I mean, there have been people who've sort of paved a path in front of us. I remember calling Ned during that time because I was getting a feeling that there was a window that was going to be open, but I think I said we had about 13 months that we had to kind of get in the game in some form, or we were going to get boxed out completely and we never get back in, because I saw that like money people were starting to move into gaming industries, like gaming entertainment and stuff like that. And after esports failed, that is just further... That just sort of further exemplifies that narrative is always the way to go, that people are always going to gravitate to new formats if the storytelling structure is strong enough. So I don't think anybody was ever prepared for Dungeons and Dragons to have the resurgence that it did. And I don't think it would have had that resurgence without Critical Role and Stranger Things. Oh, speaking of which. So I think those two programs really paved the way to let people know that this is a new form. The 5th edition is great. The game has a new style to it. It has a new flavor. It has a new identity, which you can probably see by our design on the show, the way the show presents itself. We've really moved past that sort of dungeon crawl from the 80s. So did we always think it was going to be like this? No, but we've been working on this for how many years, and we've been slowly trying to like influence and, inspire the market to be more receptive of what you see now as the final product. So
one of the interesting things about Encounter Party, because as you mentioned, actual plays have been around for a while now. But you guys have approached how you're presenting Dungeons and Dragons very differently than a thing like, Critical Role. You've really like narrowed the focus down. There's not as much, reliance on like the mood of the table, so to speak. You guys are really focused in on the narrative, very focused in on the story, very focused on the game itself. Why did you make that decision?
Well, Brian and I had a conversation back when the first idea happened, which was when I make a lot of content, and I never want to make content that its first pitch is, well, there's someone else doing this and now I'm going to compete with them. Like, that doesn't interest me. And so when we were talking about this idea, it was always, what is happening right now and what are we consuming and what are we missing? And what we sort of said was at the quote unquote budgeted space, like, shows can focus, if you ignore mechanics, on three things. You've got story, you've got characters, and you've got players. And each one has to have its own focus and its own timeshare, but each program has to pick one that's king. And if you watch these programs, you'll see, like, how do you react to the show? What are you connecting to, right? Like, are you connecting to the players? Are you connecting to the characters? And we felt that there was a missing program that was story, and then character interaction fell out of story. And then the last piece on our priority table is, how do Ned and Brian feel playing the game, right? We wanted to remove our personal experience of the capture from the product you watch. We've always said the show is very audience focused, and the more time you spend with Ned, the less audience focused that is. That's asking the audience to care about how I feel about it. And we wanted to make it so that the audience could care however they cared. And so we said, great, story, then character, then player. And then separately, it was, great, how do we look at this and get it down to a very consumable format? Because this kind of content is often so long, it's hard to be a fan of multiple, right? Like, you kind of have to pick your one and run with it. There's only so many hours in a week. And we wanted our show to be additive. We wanted you to be able to watch our show and your favorite shows, and maybe we'd become your favorite shows. But either way, the barrier to accessing our show was not the amount of time it took to enjoy. And so those two things were really the start of the idea when we started to figure it out. And then I have been a professional video audio editor for a good chunk of my career. And one of my projects was editing 4 to 6 hour captures down into tight 90-minute narratives. I just happened to have a project that sort of like trained me for what we ended up doing with the show. And so all of those things sort of combined to say, we wanted to do a show that we're not that interested in better or worse. Those are subjective terms that people can decide for themselves. We're not trying to play that game. But we think whenever you listened to our podcast and listen to it now and watch the TV show today, it feels new. It feels different. And those are the kinds of words that excite us, that we're building something that can help other people find their own new path or whatever. But everyone who consumes our show, we feel, gets to experience something new from this art form.
There's a really good example here to sort of echo what Ned said, and that when we did the original podcast, which ran for 3 seasons, we kept getting notes that people felt like they were getting inside jokes with the characters, not the actors. Like, we wanted people to have a relationship with the characters, not with us as an actor. And we're going to make jokes, and there's going to be inside jokes that you build with a program you're watching. There's going to be memes and all sorts of stuff like that. But we found that, you will see this if you get a chance to interact with the community, and anybody watching this, we definitely suggest that you try and interact with the other Party People fan base, because they're really terrific people. But you will find that all of the inside jokes and all of the jokes that you tell are treating the fantasy characters as if they're real people, and you're not having inside jokes with us as actors. And that's really the flavor that we've been chasing, and that's a really good metric for us to see if our model is working correctly.
We got a really nice write-up the other day where the person writing it said, I can't stop thinking about this show, and I have yet to think about the players by name. I'm calling all the players by character. And that is exactly the kind of experience we are trying to build, which is, this is a story. Get on board. And that was always the decision we've made from 5 years ago when the podcast began.
Now,
that's a little awkward for me.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to ask.
I don't really have character names.
Did this like approach impact how you planned the campaign as a DM, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the model was always, I hope people get inspired by what we do, but it might be difficult to replicate at home. I want sort of the grandiosity and the intricacy of the campaign as a game to, inspire people to try new things at their house. But when we decided to come at this program from the entertainment direction, that meant that, I'm thinking about this as a television show, which changes how you write it. Things are a lot less open-ended. I have to make sure that, we have endings that can be treated as endings of episodes. There were commercial breaks now, which was a new thing I had to write for. You have to keep the game organic and natural and not like try and railroad the entire story. But at the same time, the studio was like, what is the workflow? Where are we going to be on what day? What are we doing? So this was definitely it's definitely a challenge to write a game, but it wasn't that much more of a challenge to write the TV show in Counterparty, because that formula is pretty standard in the industry. So thankfully, I have a great team and a great group of cast members at the table who I think do a really, really good job of like listening and vibing in on what I'm presenting. We've all been working together for 4 years now. So I find that it's just really, really important that I get as explicit and exciting as possible with the setup for everything. And then I let them kind of take it from there. And then it's all just reactionary for me.
How long was this all filmed over the course of?
10
2 weeks.
10 days.
Wow.
7 hours a day. So we had, I think in the end, we had 66 hours of footage. And then myself and cast member Andrew Krug spent the next 6 weeks editing 62 hours down to 48-minute chunks. And then we handed off those sessions to an incredible editing team who picked angles and kind of shortened and tightened and figured out the pacing more than we already had and things like that. And, something I think is really fun about our show is that Brian has a plan, but what episode it falls on or will it be an ending? Like, we don't really know till the editing room, right? Like, and Brian does a really great job of giving me a lot of setups throughout the time we're recording that could have been the end of an episode, but ended up being an ad break, right? Like, we have these moments that we can kind of lean to as needed in the editing room because we did have a very tight ad break sheet, right? Like, we needed ad breaks to fall roughly certain amounts of time from each other, and there needed to be so many in an episode. And we needed to make sure those ad breaks didn't feel like thrown at you. And to do that is really, I think, a testament to the way Brian runs the table and to the cast recognizing like this is a moment to give some weight, but also a pause. Like it feels very organic, but the edit down, each episode is averages about 3 hours and 15 minutes down to 48 minutes of show. And so, the cast is just really good at recognizing which moments are probably something and giving them the weight they need to get to a perfect ad break or even a perfect episode ending.
And also getting immediately off things that we immediately feel are not going to be conducive to good content. Like whenever we hit a dead end or we feel the momentum shifting or something like that, like everyone does a really good job, or it's my responsibility to just go, all right, we're going to move on to the next thing.
So the first episode, it opens in the middle of combat, I believe. What was the decision? Like, what went into that? Like, that you guys literally started your entire TV show in
Can I preface this answer with 2 tidbits for the people at home? I'm a player in this campaign. I'm a producer of this show. I have pitched this show for 2.5 years. And every time Brian gets into story talk with people, I have to drop the call, which is really scary as a producer who's trying to tell people to pick up my show. But 2 things are true about our show. Number 1, we built our characters with Brian separately from each other. So we are meeting every single character live in moment 1 of that TV show. No one knows anything about each other. We saw each other's art when we got on set. 2, Brian told me we were starting on a boat stuck at sea without wind. That was what I knew minute 1 was gonna be. And we opened the show and Brian screamed, "Roll initiative."
Hello and welcome to Encounter Party. But before we begin, roll initiative! Yeah!
Wait, hold on. For serious?
Yes, here we go. Game is starting.
Okay.
So was there a moment where you just literally thought that there were 2 actual dead cast members?
Look at my face in the opening of that episode. I do this. It's not good acting. It's just Ned being like, what is happening right now? Anyway, Brian, take it away.
I'm not a very truthful DM. I lie all the time. So, Ned expressed earlier that, we're trying to make something new. We're trying not to step on other people's toes. And one of the things that we're constantly talking about is we're always, because we claim to be an audience focused show where we're really removing our own. Don't care about us. Don't worry about us. We need to make sure that everything is audience focused. And that means that we constantly need to be taking audience time into consideration, because that's part of the cost of entry. Like, you have to commit your time, and we're talking 22 episodes of a fantasy epic. We all know what getting into a new fantasy epic is like, and we all know that the commitment that can come with, and that can be a really big ask to get people to come in. And so part of that has always been, why burn an hour or two getting a slow start in a farm where some random people learn that they're children of destiny, and we go through the same rigmarole. Like, epic fantasies are meant to be a slow start. There's meant to be a slow build. The standard criticism of Japanese role-playing fantasies are that it's a group of kids struggling with school who end up defeating God with the power of friendship. It's supposed to be a really, really long crescendo, and we have that. But we needed something that was just pow. We needed something that if you didn't watch us the first episode, somebody said you need to go watch it. We need to get you through the first 5 minutes. We need to get you to stay looking. The best way I could think to do that was to have a shock opener. I wouldn't miss the first 3 minutes of the episode because it's very clear that it's central to the entire plot at the start. And so, yep, it's shocking. Yes, it's shock TV, but it also gets us moving immediately. It gives us a chance to showcase some cool terrain that we had custom built. It gives the lighting guys a chance to show off their stuff. It gives the music a chance to show off its stuff, which I actually ended up doing about 80% of the scoring on the show. It gives the characters, like the players, a chance to just like really get into something hard. And it doesn't bog down the audience with a lot of information. Like, you don't have to learn anything in the beginning. You just have to experience and feel. And that visceral start, I thought, was going to be the best way to get people to buy into a new program.
It also completely changes the way the players talk right at the beginning, right? Now there's something we all just dealt with that we need to figure out while also wondering why these people were also there. Like, I think that next scene is so fascinating because it's the kind of scene none of us could have prepped for. Everyone's ready to introduce their characters, and then Brian threw a huge wrench in how these characters now understand each other. And in doing so, it made for what I think is a really fun, different sort of launch conversation for a party.
Here's just a writing tip for people who are engaged in actual play entertainment, or people who want to get into it and want to write campaigns and stuff like that, or people who just want to write in fantasy in general. Something that Dungeons and Dragons typically ignores, even with their home brew stuff or with their pre-generated books and stuff like that, they always ignore the most important thing, which is step one. Why are these people in the same room together? Mm-hmm. What starts their journey? And usually things just kind of get skipped over, or the general narrative in Dungeons and Dragons is you're all adventurers, so you're all going on an adventure. But as people grow and start to get more invested in character building and character backstory, as they continue to be inspired by these narrative heavy actual plays, you can't really skip over that anymore. You have to have a reason for people to care about each other. Otherwise, they won't interact with each other. So step one, why are all of these characters in the same room? Also, all stories need to begin with the question, why is this the most important day of this character's life? Which is why you're starting the story on page one. So this was also a creative way to get people in, but I also want to pay off people who are investing their time. So if you jump in, you get an immediate payoff that then continues to pay dividends over the next couple of episodes immediately. So you're immediately rewarded by just turning on the TV for 2 minutes.
So Pete, got a couple more minutes left. What questions do you have?
Yeah, we'll just go over a few real quick to end it. So it kind of, we start the episode with a dream sequence and media res, a shared vision, but then we very quickly move on to a murder mystery. And one of the most interesting things about that, well, we're keeping this episode 1 and 2. We're assuming everyone has seen episode 1 and 2. We're not going to go beyond that.
Great.
Because one of the most interesting things about that was the fact that the detective of the group so far seems to be what most people would consider an unlikely source would be the fighter. It's the long strider. It's this Vin's character. And is there more we're going to learn about that as the series progresses about this, like, are the long striders like this sort of Poirot-esque military police? Like, is there more history to that?
Yeah, you will learn about the Long Striders. They are a group. David explains it very, very briefly. The Long Striders are a paramilitary brigade that was created by his dad. It's alluded to a little bit. We'll learn more about them over the course of the season. We didn't like. They're a group that I wrote that David sort of joined up with. So they're unique to our campaign. We didn't just slip them in for something later. We will learn more about them later. We're going to learn about a lot of stuff later. But that came down to one of the things that my job, because we're making a TV show and we're making an actual play, kind of, and we're doing all this writing and stuff like that. It's really important that everyone gets continual screen time, and it's my job to spread it all around. So as you watch the show, you will see things shuffle and refocus. And we found that because of Vin's fate in the opening moments of the story, we were pretty David light for the first episode as he was trying to figure out things on his own quietly. But then we shift the focus to David in episode 2 so he can kind of catch up. And then at the end of episode 2, you see that we shift to Sarah, and we kind of keep jumping around that way, which is my responsibility. And that's, also something that the studio wants. It's also just, that's what David does. That's David being, David likes getting in there, and he likes discovering motivations, if that makes sense. So it's much less solving what's happening, and it's more he wants to understand why what's happening is happening. And that's just David as an actor.
Gotcha. And speaking of character spotlights, one of the other big spotlight moments of that first episode was with Flick and that really interesting lockpicking sequence. How did that come about? And then I'm assuming as we go along, we will also learn more about this curse, which is, a brave, bold, anti-reading stance in today's day and age. The curse that blinds you when you read.
Oh, that's what's going on. Cool. So we, I pitched it to Ned. It was a setup for some stuff that we needed. I can't remember how the voice came about. Do you?
Yeah, it's a complete aberration on, not like the D&D term, like on a conversation Brian and I had when we were first discussing potential characters a long time ago. And that initial conversation is wildly different than how anything ended up, but that's where like the kernel began. And when we were building characters, how it would work is we would all come in with ideas of characters, not mechanics, not of that. And so I came in saying like, I'm building, this kind of like, I want to build like a rogue who's not a rogue, a bard who's not a bard. I want it to feel like something new. And then, there's this other thing I think would be cool. Does it work in your story in any way? And Brian would be like, I don't know. I'll come back to you next week. And then he would come back and be like, hey, what if this was more like this? And I'd be like, why? And he'd be like, can't tell you. And so,
oh wait, no, I do remember when we were writing, I said, you can play the character you want to play, but I get to add one thing to your story and you do not get to say no. That I remember. That I do remember. And you were like, okay. And then here we are with this thing.
Here we are.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So in terms of that, I mean, I think that's about as much as I can say at this time. Yeah. In terms of that sequence. I did not know the plan there. We
That
have
was my question. If you knew, like, say, that was all you just having to go through that entire sequence on the fly to figure it out.
Tell people anything ahead.
I figured, but you never know.
I'll peek behind the curtain a little bit. That sequence took me about 9 minutes to solve, right? And then it edited into like what, a minute 15, right?
It edited really well.
Yeah, it's a glorious edit. But and I'll tell you, like, the puzzle work in this show is a testament to the editing team after Andrew and I completely. We did not cut down things like that. We left them the raw footage and roadmaps to say, like, we definitely need this moment. We think this angle is cool. You make it shorter. So when we were editing the story stuff, that was Andrew and I saying, like, okay, this conversation flows to this conversation. This sentence works. We don't need that part. But all of the lock stuff, we don't touch that. We let the editing team really take that and run with it. So the first time we saw, that was the cut that is in the end episode right now, is basically the draft we saw in the first draft of this edit. And Brian called me and we were both like, yeah, like, it was so cool because it was about 9 minutes of footage that we said, we think this is a good shot. We want to make sure you can see Ned manipulating with his hands. We'd love to see the paper so the audience can play at home, but it is their cut down, not mine.
I wanted to experiment with people being able to solve puzzles at home at the same time.
Okay.
And so this came about, this was written way back before we knew sort of how the channel was going to work and that there were going to be live broadcasts. We assumed it was going to be on demand, which by the time this comes out, it might be.
Might be. It should be on demand soon.
So if you haven't watched the show yet, it's likely that you will be consuming it on demand, in which case you can actually pause and try and solve this puzzle for yourself. So there are several puzzles throughout this season that you can actually interact with directly through the screen. That was just my way of trying to get people to interact more, get people more engaged, make them feel more like they were part of the, mystery process. And this was sort of our first experiment to do that. And thanks to the editing team, honestly, I was very nervous about this scene, but when we were at the premiere on the 13th, like, everyone was like cheering and
audiences were like, cool. Like, it was such a cool reaction.
They were applauding and hooting and hollering for Ned having solved that under so much pressure and with everything that's going on in that scene while he's trying to do math. We think that's a great showcase of the sort of extremity that I'm willing to go to during the campaign.
So, any final thoughts, pitches, anything like that before we wrap this up?
Yes. If you check out our show, and you should, we are going to give you the kind of television experience that you haven't experienced before. This show is on its feet, being made up in real time for the audience specifically and edited for that focus. We had a viewer who was live with us at the premiere on the 14th in our Discord server who said, I've never watched a movie I could see in my head. Like, it was someone who's never played D&D. They just heard from a friend that they would like this, so they tuned in. We've always said our show is more fun to watch than to play, and that the audience gets to experience the story at the exact same time as the characters. And in doing so, the audience really comes on this roller coaster with us. And that is an editing choice, that's an acting choice. But watching our show, you will see something I think you've never seen before, either on television or in, gaming entertainment. And more specifically, we're most interested in you experiencing the uniqueness of our form and jumping into the story.
It's difficult to express to people that we want you to dive in and be prepared to be rewarded as a viewer immediately. And it's such a challenge for us to express in the correct way that episode 1 is somehow the least good episode, because it just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and it just doesn't stop growing. And it is one full complete crescendo from 1 to 22.
22 episodes, snowball, y'all.
So just know that literally every episode is better than the one before. And I know that's sort of a trite thing to say, but it just really is. And that has to do with the cast and the storytelling and everything. So once you get to episode 1 and then episode 2, I think that immediate step up is obvious. So don't be afraid to dive in. All you need is about 3 minutes and you'll understand.
Okay. Well, Encounter Party can be found on D&D Adventures, which is a fast channel that is currently available on Amazon Freevee and Plex.
Yep.
I got that wrong with the last one of these.
No, you figured it out this time. You got it right.
We called it like Flux or something like that.
We called it something weird. Yeah, Tuesdays,
Yeah,
9 a.m.
It was like, I
Pacific.
don't even think it was a word. But anyways, it's available on D&D Adventures. It will be out on demand on those platforms here in the coming days. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the first couple episodes live, check it out on demand. And
You can watch it live, reruns on Fridays, 9 p.m. and midnight Eastern, and the previous 2 episodes will always precede the new episode. So at 7 p.m. Eastern, episode 1 will play, 8 p.m. Eastern, episode 2 will play, and at 9 p.m. Eastern, the 3rd episode will play.
That actually that's fantastic.
And given the state of the story, you're probably going to want to watch things more than once.
You're going to want to go back.
All right. Well, there you have it. I think that's about as strong as a pitch as you can get. Also, be sure to like and subscribe this channel. So
This channel rocks.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
You rock.
I like and subscribe this channel.
There we go. What a better I don't even know. Cut this part out, Pete.
No, Pete, leave that in.
No, we'll have to leave it in.
that
We're not sticking what Christian means to say is thank you for liking and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on the character sheet.
Like just instant brain death. I'm so not used to hearing compliments. I don't know how to take it.
Fade this out slowly as you go to the end card.
My hands.